In this video, we're going to show you how to replace your rear drive shaft coupler located right at the tail part of your drive shaft. Now, our rear damper is held on with 6 bolts. 3 of them are T55 Torx bolts going through to our rear flange here, and then we have a nut and bolt application holding the drive shaft flange to the damper itself. I'm going to go ahead and use a 1/2-inch drive ratchet with some extensions, and we're going to feed this up above the exhaust, and then we're going to use our 18mm wrench on the nut side here. We're going to remove these nuts and pull out these Torx bolts. Now we have our Torx bit into the head of the bolt. I'm going to go ahead and use my 18mm, and we did soak these down with some rust penetrant before doing this here. Pull that bolt out. So now we put our vehicle into neutral. We can't pull the key out. What we want to do is go ahead and disconnect our battery at this point. We're going to use our 10mm wrench, and we're going to loosen the nut on our ground terminal here. Once you have that loose, we're going to spin that and disconnect it. I'm going to come on over to the positive side. We're going to do the same here. I'm going to disconnect that, set that aside. Now with the vehicle in neutral and you're back underneath the vehicle, I'm going to use a pry bar, and I'm basically just going to go between a couple of the other bolts, and we can go ahead and freely spin this unit. And what we're going to do is reposition our next Torx bit bolt right here, and let's go ahead and perform the same job we just did. Feed our ratchet up through the top. We'll spin this a bit, get that nut loose. There we go. Second bolt out. Now we went ahead and we removed 2 of the Torx bit bolts going through into our rear flange here. We're now going to go ahead and remove 2 of the bolts holding the drive shaft flange to the coupler here, using our 18mm wrench on the front, 18mm wrench on the rear. Let's go ahead, loosen, and remove 2 of these. Now the reason why we're doing this here is that by keeping other bolts in there, it's going to keep this drive shaft from dropping down. It's going to keep everything supported for now where we want it. And then we'll loosen the other 2, the last 2, and we'll slowly remove them together. Now this has a nut and a washer on the back side. Pull that bolt out. All right, let's go ahead and rotate this. Get that nut and washer off. Pull that bolt out. Now these are the last 2 bolts. One of these is holding the drive shaft to the damper here, and the other one is holding the damper to the back flange. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get these loose pretty much all the way except for a couple threads by hand. All right, I'm going to take out our last bolt. And on the driver's side here on our exhaust, we have a O2 sensor. We want to go ahead and follow the wire up. There's a connector right here, and there's a little tab on the back side. I'm going to press in on that and disconnect the connector like so. On the bottom side of our exhaust manifold, we have a 12mm nut right here on the stud. I'm going to go ahead and loosen and remove this. And on the top side here, I'm going to go ahead and use a swivel. This upper nut on ours is a 16mm. Go ahead and loosen and remove that. Now the hardware on your particular vehicle might vary. The goal here is basically to remove the nut off of the stud, or remove the stud, however you need to separate the exhaust. Once we get this off, we're going to go ahead and repeat for the passenger side. Now we're using a pry bar going up, and we're going to get on the back side of this bushing. Our particular vehicle has a trailer hitch receiver on the back, so we can use that as leverage. And we're just basically just going to pry on this here. And we want to get that hanger off. We're going to pry bar up above our tip here and underneath the bushing, and we're just going to pry, work that hanger off like so. All right, that is now separated. Let's go ahead and move to the passenger side, do the same over there. Now right behind our center muffler here, there are 2 more hangers. I'm going to go ahead and use a pair of pliers to assist us with this. The exhaust is going to be free floating, and it's only going to be supported by our center cross beam. So you want to go ahead and get a couple people together. You want to go ahead and support up that exhaust. That way there nothing comes down and falls on you or twists abnormally, causing damage to any of the exhaust system. Now in front of our rear section, we have some more rubber hangers here. So let's go ahead and grab a couple people here. We're going to pop off this rubber hanger up top, and then we'll go ahead and remove that center brace and lower the exhaust. On the center section, we have 4 13mm nuts. Let's loosen and remove those. And let's now go ahead and lower the exhaust. On the back of our drive shaft here, before we separate this from our damper, I'm going to go ahead and use a crayon here, use it as a marker, and I'm going to mark this here. I'm going to mark this ear, and I'm going to mark it on my differential. So that way there, when we reinstall this here with our new damper, I'm going to go ahead and line up the drive shaft in the original position so it's in this factory balanced location. Now our support bearing here is held up by 2 14mm bolts on either side. We have the screw jack holding up the tail section of the drive shaft, so I want to be careful when lowering this down. All right, let's go ahead and repeat for the other side. We moved our screw jack closer to the back part of the drive shaft. With the damper here loose, we're going to continue to tap that forward. Let's go ahead and tap off. Let's go ahead and replace it with our new part. You want to make sure that the little sleeves here line up with our drive shaft. And go ahead and tap these on. So the coupler is engaged onto the tail part of our drive shaft. Let's go ahead and raise this back up into position. All right, at this point here, I want to go ahead and rotate our drive shaft. Remember those marks that we put on our drive shaft? We have one here on the differential, and there's one on this ear on the drive shaft. So I want to go ahead and make sure this lines up. This ear goes here. We also want to go ahead and compress the drive shaft inward so we can get up over the nub here of the shaft on the differential. I'm going to put some grease up here. At this point, give that drive shaft a little bump forward. You can see it compress. We can go ahead and bring this up into position. All right. Now I want to go ahead and line up the mark here on the ear with the line on your differential. So what we want to do now is we have these metal sleeves here poking on the back side of our damper. There's 3 of those. You now want to go ahead and take that flange, rotate that. That way there, when we bolt this together, that metal sleeve will insert into the flange and lock in as well. Let's go ahead and install our bolts now. And we put some blue Loctite on those threads. Then we can proceed installing the other bolts. So the bolts themselves are going to go through the front side of the flange, through the coupler here. The Torx bolts go through the coupler and into the rear flange. Now that we have all the bolts installed, let's go ahead and snug those down. Now that we have all of our bolts snug down, let's go ahead and torque these down to 43 foot-pounds. And we're going to go ahead and do this for all 6. Now we went ahead and cleaned up the threads on our bolts here and put some anti-seize compound on them. Let's go ahead and get these bolts started here. Get that threaded up in there and get the second one in there. Once we have those started, let's go ahead and snug those down. Just want to make sure those are good and tight. Now let's go ahead and raise up our exhaust, and we want to go ahead and get both driver and passenger side flanges lined up. We're going to get our nuts installed on the driver side flange. Once these two are caught, we're going to go over to the passenger side, and you want to go ahead and repeat the process over there. In the center section, we want to go ahead and put up our cross brace here. I want to go ahead and get 2 nuts started on this side here. All right, we'll go ahead and get the 2 on the other side started. With all 4 of those nuts started, let's go ahead and tighten those down. Now before we install these here, I'm going to go ahead and throw some grease on these here. It's going to help these pop into the rubber hangers a little bit easier. I do this for all of the hangers. And just go ahead and use your pliers or whatever you have available to go ahead and pop these back on. I want to go ahead and lower the exhaust a little bit. I want to pull this over. Let's go ahead and install the other 5 hangers. Just manipulating that exhaust around. Push up on the muffler here and get that hanger on. I'm going to use my pry bar and just tap the pry bar with a hammer and pop that on. Now that we have all the hangers installed on the driver's side, go ahead and repeat for the passenger side. All right, so let's go ahead and snug down our down pipe to our manifold. Now you want to do this evenly. I'm just going to get this to bottom out a little bit, and then I go back, snug down the other side. I'm going to go ahead and snug that down, and then we'll come back to the other side here. Once this is tight, let's go ahead and repeat for the passenger side. Go ahead and bring up your connector for your oxygen sensor. Line that up. Press that together. You'll feel it and hear it lock in. Repeat for the passenger side. Let's go ahead and reconnect our battery here. Install the positive terminal here. Let's go ahead and tighten that down. And once you have that good and tight, go ahead and install your ground terminal. We'll do the same for this. At that point there, we can go ahead and close down our cover here, and you're all set.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.